Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Beit Midrash. Hope everybody's doing well and everybody's hanging in there and all this stuff. Um, we're going to go ahead and jump in a little bit. We're in chapter 10 in God of Becoming and Relationship on the Jewish life cycle and how it fits in. So before I start, as always, wanted to just kind of open it up and see if there were comments, thoughts, questions that we can reactions to your reading.
You got two of them here.
Pardon?
Stuart can go first.
I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the way that he described human beings as not human beings, but human becomings, which I thought just encapsulated a lot of what this process theology is all about, because the world changes, we change, we're never the same from day to day. And so if you just remember that you're a being of becoming, then you will know pretty much what you need to know about process theology.
Yes, that was a good line. I like that line too. That who we are today doesn't mean that's who we are going to be tomorrow, and what happens today affects who we are tomorrow, just as yesterday affected who we are today. So there is we're not the same day to day along the lines, which is a nice way to think about it in the context of the life cycle. That what are we actually doing in celebrating these different life cycle moments?
Well, to me, the point seemed to be that we're connecting to what is larger and the becoming relationship of the entire universe, the way I look at it, or God. It's an opportunity to not only to celebrate your individual stage, but to look beyond yourself and connect and realize that you're just part of a bigger, of everything else that is. But that's my answer to your question.
Yes, I think there is something, part of it is that we are connecting to something larger than ourselves, but also that ourselves is part of something, again, I want to say there's two processes going on simultaneously, right? There's the self process of your becoming, but there's also how you fit into the larger picture, how that is evolving and changing and processing as well. So, as he says, it is not our life cycle we celebrate, it is the life of the covenant linking God with the Jewish people that is worthy of our attention and that justifies our celebration. There's a sense that fits in with the process view that we often think of the life cycle as celebrating this individual's accomplishment or this individual's part in or reaching this particular stage of life. And I think part of what Rabbi Artson's trying to argue is it's not just the individual stage of life, but how the individual fits into a larger picture. And you look at the rituals for each of these life cycles, and you get a sense of how ritually we try to do that. So, with birth, particularly with boys, though we do it with girls as well, with Brit Milah, what do? We connect it back to Abraham and the commandment to circumcise your children on the eighth day, your sons on the eighth day. Um, that's connecting us back to our tradition, but also to all of our ancestors who have fulfilled that mitzvah along the way. Um, with bar bat mitzvah, we call them up to the Torah to show how they are claiming a piece of that, of the tradition for themselves, and they are making it their own. And we have them give a Devar Torah to say, what have I learned from this? At the wedding ceremony, what do? We the Sheva Brachot, the 7 blessings we recite under the chuppah, put this couple on opposite poles of the timeline. They put them on one pole of, this is like a new Adam and Eve at creation, and there's a messianic hope that goes along with it at the end. And in death, we're honoring the role that these individuals played in our lives and how they affected us along the way. So in a sense, like we're tying it always back into a larger picture beyond just ourselves. And while individually, yes, we're marking transitions, we're also saying how this individual fits in as a whole. Thoughts, comments, Lisa?
Well, one thing that I liked about this chapter, going back to the transitions that you just mentioned, is the idea that these rituals are comforting in times of transition. And because I'm somebody who doesn't always do transitions easily. And I know I was constantly reminding my kids, none of my kids does transitions that easily either. And I was constantly reminding them, like the first week of camp or the first week of college or the beginning of anything, remember, the changes are always hard and it does get better. And so I guess, I like the idea that, transitions can be hard, and that Judaism and this process theology gives us like tools to get through the transitions, and even knowing that we're part of something bigger makes us feel not so alone in the transitions.
Yeah, you and a large number, like a large percentage of the population, transitions are hard. In my intro to Judaism class, we have a section on prayer, and there's a whole section of the class that's dedicated to the concept of keva versus kavanah, of having a fixed liturgy versus having intention and saying what's on your heart. And a little bit what you said, Lisa, is kind of what I try to tell them in the class. Like, why do we have keva? Like, why don't we just pour our hearts out whenever we feel like it? Why not just do kavanah? And my thought is kind of along what you said, that there are times in your life, particularly times of transition, where you don't know what to say. A loved one, when a parent dies, you're like, what do I say? What am I supposed to do now? How am I supposed to, represent all that this person has meant to me in my life and all that they did for me? What am I supposed to do with that now that this person has died? And the tradition says, here you go. Here's something to do. Here's a blessing you say. Here's something you tear to represent your grief. Here's how you can honor the deceased. And as he says, on the mirror image of that, first time you hold your child, it's like, this is great. This is amazing. Now what? Like, what do I do now? um, and the ritual said, and the tradition says, here you go. Here's what you do. Here's something to do to help you, guide you, and how do you transition, and help you not feel so alone. Help you not feel like you're on your own to figure this out, but that you are part of something larger and part of part of a community that has gone through this for thousands of years, but also that this is a representative moment in your spiritual life that you can now pass on and help grow and develop along the way as well. Yes, Diane.
So many years ago, I read the book written by Rabbi David Walpe titled Making Loss Matter. And the one outstanding lesson that I took away from that book is that we experience change every single day. And even though the very big changes are the ones that sometimes knock us off our feet, we still have a reality. Things are always changing. And I think maybe that's helped me a lot in the course of my life when the big milestones happen is, how did I get to be 80 years old? Well, one foot in front of the other and lots of luck and good doctors. What can I say? But it it's a bit shocking that these major changes. You can't prepare yourself for the loss of a parent or your child leaving home or the arrival of a new grandchild, your first grandchild. You think you know what it's going to be, but these things didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like someone flipped a switch.
Yeah, it's all of it has been part of a larger process to get here in the first place. And what we're trying to honor is how do you honor the covenant in this transitional phase? And how what does it mean to be part of a covenant as you are moving through this new phase of life now? So, for going from birth to non-life to life, I think that's how he phrased it. Non-life to life, that the growth of being from non-being, is a chance to say, this covenant has been renewed, this covenant has been continued on through this child, and there's a hope with this child that he or she is going to carry on the values and the traditions and the lessons of our lives throughout their life, and then hopefully pass those on as well to the life of their children, God willing, down the line. So, and as you get to a teenager and you want to rebel against everything, you take a moment to reestablish how does this Judaism, how does this covenant fit into my life as I'm maturing, as I'm coming into puberty, as I'm coming into myself? How does this evolve? What does it mean now in a different way than when I was 5? And when you get married, it becomes a different question. It becomes, how does this covenant apply to me and my family now that we are a family together? So each stage marks an evolution of the covenant in your own life, and how can you live that out, remind yourself of it, and have it continue to be a part of your life along the way. Cindy?
Think I just sort of had like a moment because I feel like, and you can pat yourself on the back for that one. I feel like we use the term, being part of something greater. It just sort of like, I don't know, it's just trite, right? To me. and how you've explained, and I didn't really get what Rabbi Artson was saying in the chapter. It didn't, I don't know, it just didn't sink in. But the way that you're describing that, how ritual and prayer, that like, that's the tether, that's the link to whatever, to be, something greater, whether it be, I mean, used to think just like part of the community, part of the world, but it's bigger than that. There's a spiritual aspect to it that I don't think that I had internalized until you explained, what his point is. So thank you.
Yeah, look, I think of it a little bit this way: is that my wife and I have been dating for about 22 years now, which I know is still not a long time for some of you, but when we think about it, there was distinct moments in our relationship. Our dating life was a little different than our engaged life, in our living together life, and different than our married life, and different than our life as parents, and that was different, that like even our life of parents of two kids changes. Now that we're parents of a teenager and a adolescent, it's a different than when we were parents of a toddler and a child. And so our relationship evolves over the span of our relationship to each other, which evolves as we continue through. And I think part of it, what the argument here is, your relationship with God should similarly change as you go through your lifespan, and that each of these marks different chapters in that relationship and how you can be connected along the way, as you enter these new chapters in your relationship. Stuart? I looked down and saw Barbara / Dr. Stewart, and I almost said Barbara, and I'm like, wait, no, that's Stewart.
Oh, it's me. Again, I'm back. The second little section that he entitled Sacred, Alluring, and Dangerous. I didn't understand the dangerous part of it. I mean, I have my own ideas, but I wasn't sure he included it in what he wrote about it. What dangerous is there about this?
Dangerous, I feel like the way he writes it, I feel like dangerous is not necessarily the right word. But he does say at the end of that first paragraph, for those with the book, it's like near the end of the paragraph on page 84. So those transitions are also terrifying, with an undercurrent of danger, uncontainability, and unpredictability. Like there's a sense of, there's a moment in if you think of it in terms of the covenant, but even if you think of it in terms of tradition, there's a moment in each of these stages where the relationship is in danger, at least spiritual relationship. There's a moment in birth where don't know what this child's going to do. You don't know who this child's going to be. You don't know what their connection's going to be. So what do? We try to establish it from 8 days old. We try to establish it early on. Adolescence, as he says later on that page, the period of adolescence is one of exploration, boundary pushing, anger, frustration, joy, and discovery. And chafing under the restrictions of adult supervision. It's a time of constantly renegotiated privilege and limits. Kids rebel. Teenagers rebel. That's kind of their job, so to speak. That's part of what they're supposed to be doing at that age. And so, again, there's a moment of danger here of, are they going to rebel too far, or rebel away from the covenant and from religion and from faith too much that they're not able to come back from it. There's a danger in marriage of, it can be very tempting to let the physical relationship in front of you take the spot of the spiritual relationship you need as well. And how can the covenant continue now that it's in a renegotiated, now as a partnership with somebody else? It's when you're on your own, you can decide what you want to do. When you have to make relationship with somebody else, you don't always get what you want. And how does the covenant evolve through that? And what does the covenant mean when we are no longer connected with those who helped us support ourselves in the covenant, whether it's family, whether it's friends, as we separate, as he says, separating from loved ones and transitioning from active participant to loving memory. There's a moment of danger there that the lessons they tried to teach us are going to be lost.
Well, I mean, one of the dangers of having a child, especially your first one, is that you don't know how to do it. I mean, who taught you how to be a good parent? That's something we could probably develop a curriculum for that would probably be better than what we have right now, which is just you hand the baby off and it's yours. Go ahead and take care of it.
Yeah. So the two things I say is, as the youngest, I very easily say that's why my parents had three, because they finally got it right by the time they got to me. But more seriously, even if you were to develop a curriculum, even if you were to develop a guidebook, it's not going to last very long. Every child is a little different. Every child, you can't treat any two children the same. And so, which I think is a little bit of the part of process also, that everyone's created differently in God's image and everyone's a different reflection of the divine. So you just have to treat them the way they are. No two kids are going to come with the same guidebook. It's hard and it's scary to be like, okay, now what do I do? And it's also scary when you run into other things like, what if your child has health issues? Now what do you do? How does that play? Yes, Esther.
You're muted, Esther.
Okay, and I did something else that I didn't mean to do. Okay. I think, we were talking about very specific stages and phases and circumstances. And when I think about life, I think just life. Life is terrifying. And if you fully engage in your life, and we've all talked about this, Diane, one day at a time, one step, one foot in front of the other. When you really think about life is terrifying. And I think in many ways, that's why people have religion, because it allows you to feel a part of something bigger than you. And just knowing that other people have gone through this before, other people have survived this before, and somehow knowing that you will too. And religion just provides you with some extra guardrails in some regard. Guardrails and information, knowledge that people have gone through this, that people have survived this. I don't necessarily think about this often in terms of religion, but just even in terms of thinking about, people have survived wars, people have survived the Holocaust, people have survived, we will survive this political situation somehow or another. We survived COVID. People will get harmed and there will be tragedy and there will be suffering in life, but somehow this knowledge that we'll get through it. But back to this dangerous, I think every step in life, because you don't know, we are walking through this world in many ways blind. Without knowing what the next phase will bring.
Yeah, I was reminded of a song lyric song I've been listening to a lot lately, and see, he says, even though it feels like it won't, the world just keeps spinning round. You know, like, yeah, yeah, we've we've been through this before. It's not, we've been through this, we've been through worse. Um, the um, world has continued on through a lot of what we have gone through in thousands, millions of years. So for us, it feels like very immediate because we're the ones experiencing it. But like the world's going to keep continuing either way. Um, we don't know what that'll look like, which is uncertainty is always scary for us humans. Um, I hear you. Yes, TK.
Well, going a little sideways maybe, or a little forward on page 87. I think it's about in the middle of the book. He's talking about the covenant, and he makes a statement: the covenant is made real through the study and implementation of Torah. And I would just really like to hear a little bit more about it, because I think I understand the reconnecting with the covenant, the relationship, through reading the stories in Torah. But I don't understand, how do we connect with that idea when we're reading about archaic laws that don't apply to us anymore? And I know we touched on this back in the previous book, but apparently the question is still bothering me.
I think there's a couple ways to look at it. Torah can mean a couple of different things in Jewish writings. It can mean narrowly the 5 books of the Torah. It can mean slightly more expansively, the entire Bible, the entire Tanakh. Or it can mean virtually pretty much any teaching or writing on Jewish content, that, you know, this is Torah, even though, it's not in the Torah. This is still Torah because it's exploring Jewish content and what it means. Or to more expansively, Torah can mean pretty much anything that we do in our lives. Um, there's a classic Talmudic story of a student, who climbs under his teacher's bed and stays there while he's having sex with his wife. And when at some point the student makes a sound, and the teacher's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, this too is Torah, and I must learn it." So there's a level that Torah applies to everything that we do, and that you can learn Torah, from behavior. So, the reference that TK is making is the kind of the last full paragraph before revisiting the life cycle as a process of covenants. It's in the middle of 87. Where he says, the celebration of real connection, embeddedness, and relationship is indeed an engine of hope and purpose, an endless living process. Judaism labels that connecting, that relating, brit, or covenant, and it is made real through the study and implementation of Torah. That rabbis teach that when two people are studying Torah, God's presence, the Shekhinah, rests up between them. And that sometimes it's not really the law itself, it's the study of the law that's important. It's the process of trying to uncover God's will and uncover what God is saying and uncover how we are supposed to live our lives. That's the process. That's what Torah study is actually supposed to be. It's not necessarily, if you commit a sin, you bring such and such animal as an offering to the altar, and this is how you slaughter it, and this is what you do with it, and this is how. That's what the Torah says. But I think what Rabbi Artson is referring to is more, how does what the Torah says actually, the process of studying it and learning it, how does that actually come to apply to your life? And that process of studying brings you in deeper connection with God and creates a deeper spiritual connection just by the process of having the conversation. Does that make sense?
It's it's a very interesting perspective. On the other hand, I think I get that. I like it, but there's also the practical matter of looking at something like that, like the sacrifices, or, when you should stone somebody, can also drive you from looking for God in that. I mean, the only way to really discuss that would be maybe to me, would be in historical context. How do you make that spiritual? Or understanding God's purpose.
So, look, yes. So, what is, the rabbis have this conversation of, why is there all this discussion of the death penalties and what you're supposed to do? And part of what they have to kind of understand what the Torah is saying and why it's saying it and where is it saying it and how does it say it. But part of the idea is you shall wipe out evil from your midst. It's a way of enforcing justice in this world, that there are things that are prohibited, there are things that you're not supposed to do, and how do you put up those boundaries to enforce that, to make sure that you are helping the world get to a more righteous place. And sometimes you need to let people know what the boundary is so that they don't cross it.
Okay. I can understand that in building a world of order and law, a society, I can understand historically why it went in that direction.
Well, I mean, we still have it in that direction. We still have laws and we still have death penalties that are trying to discourage people. They exist for the point of trying to discourage people from going to do those particular activities so that they don't receive those punishments. The flip of it is the Talmud also does have the statement that any court that executes somebody is labeled a bloody court. So, the rabbis had their reservations about enforcing capital punishment, but they also recognize that there might be a reason it's there, that God put it there in the first place. Doesn't mean that they want to enforce it. It just means that they realize it might need to be there somehow. Lisa? you had your hand up first, and then Esther.
Yeah, so I had a question. At the bottom of page 86, he talks about the Torah giving priority to oneness, relation, and integration while marginalizing self-centeredness and self-concern. And, I'm curious how that squares with the idea of you have to put on your own light, mask first on the plane before you can take care of others. You have to take care of yourself first before you can, be available to help others and connect to others.
I'm trying to figure out the right way to say what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
There's a level here where I think Rabbi Artson's taking a Martin Buber approach to this. That, for those who don't know, Martin Buber had his philosophy was along the lines that God is found in the genuine interrelationship between people. What he called I-thou relationships. That God is found in your ability to see each other as a being. And I think I think that plays a little bit into what he's saying here, that I think he says right after what you quoted, it is about deriving our value and contentment from our rootedness in relationship, in our connection with each other and with all of creation. God is the supremely relating one, and we derive our purpose and meaning in the context of that connection. Sounds very Buber in that phrasing. Buberish, Buberesque, right adjective there is. Boobery. That there is, and he says this on the next page, when we get overly self-focused, we lose our connection with other people, and that's when we tend to run into problems. We lose our connection and our place in the world when we're only focused on ourselves. As he says, placing ourselves at the center is a prescription for depression or insanity, which is, kind of a good line. But more than just ourselves, we are our best selves in relationship with other people. And so, yes, you do need to take care of yourself. Yes, you do need to put your mask on first, because if you don't, then you can't relate to anybody else anyway. You need to be able to be in a place where you can be in relationship. But the way we live our highest selves is in relationship with each other, with the world around us, with creation. And so if we aren't doing that, then we're setting ourselves up for trouble down the line. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's if you are just taking care of yourself for the sake of taking care of yourself and the self-centeredness, then he's, saying that's can be a prescription for depression and insanity. But if you're taking care of yourself sort of for the purpose of being strong enough to relate to others and relate to the outside world, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't think he would argue the latter point. Yes, I think, some of us some of us do need some time to self-care and need some time alone to be able to recharge our social batteries, as they say,
Yes.
so that we can go back and engage in the world. But, isolating from the world, he's trying to discourage, or, taking, like, only seeing yourself and seeing yourself as the center rather than as a piece of the rest of the world. That's a problem. But, having to step out of relationship and step back for a moment to care for yourself so that you can come back into relationship I think is perfectly acceptable. Esther, you were going to say something. If you can unmute.
Yes. What I was going to say, back to the issue of Torah, and this is about process theology, and in so many ways, the process of the Torah, I think, is a lesson in and of itself. I mean, the fact that they were discussing capital punishment, it conveys the importance of the issue. Justice, the importance of justice, the importance of people taking responsibility, and that they didn't simply say, this is what you do. It was a discussion. I mean, the rabbi talked about that you meet in a chavruta, you meet in pairs to discuss. I think that the message and the thing that spoke to me in this chapter was, it wasn't just the study of Torah, it was the study and implementation. And I think the implementation is not only implementation of the lessons that you derive, whether they're from this book or from other teachings or from people, but also the process of learning and taking things seriously, looking at issues instead of simply making a decision to fire 60,000 people. It's being conscious in a way. Which is what process is about.
I'll say a couple things. On one hand, I want to say, absolutely, 100%, yes. Like that's kind of the basis of conservative Judaism. At its core, is that the religion has evolved. It has always evolved. It has always been a process. We have for thousands of years, what we have been doing is saying, well, how does the Torah apply in this time, and how does it need to apply so that we can continue living it? And that changes from place and time and individuals and who we are. And I also yes, the study of Torah is a process. There are a couple of places, even in the Talmud, where they come to conclusions and then come back and say, in the implementation, this doesn't work. It's a great academic conversation, but not a practical one. There's a couple places in there that I'm thinking about that they come to this conclusion that it's great that we just had this great intellectual conversation. We just can't apply it to anything anymore. It doesn't work in practice. But the other thing I want to say is, as the book of Kohelet says, there's nothing new under the sun. So some of the conversations we're having in our modern society are echoed in surprising ways in conversations that were being had 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 years ago. How do we create a just society? What does that look like? What do we need to do? What are the guardrails that need to be put up? How do we put up the guardrails? What's crossing the line? Like, these are conversations that we're still struggling to have the answer to. And we're still evolving in our answers to them along the way. Cindy?
This is sort of going back to what TK was questioning, and how we were talking about that at different stages in our lives, because we are different, our process is different. And so I find that even studying the same piece of Torah at different times in my life, I'm able to see different things. And it's the paying attention to the issue and bringing yourself and your experience at that moment in time to the issue that you're studying in the Torah, that's the process. That's the learning. It's, that's the wrestling with the text and then how you can apply that to your life in the moment that you're living your life at that time. As you said, Rabbi, as conservative Jews, we don't read the Torah well. You're supposed to stone somebody for what they did. We don't stone people, but we certainly can look at it and extrapolate some lesson that we can live with that makes our life make more sense. So, that's the process. That's creating you're in relationship with your study partner, your relationship with the text, and then it heightens your relationship with the world at large by studying whatever the words are in the Torah. That's how I look at it.
Beautifully said. People say, like, why do we, on Simchat Torah, why do we go back and start it over from the beginning again? We read it already. We probably read it lots of times. We've read it over and over and over. Why? And it's kind of like the proverbial standing in the same river twice, right? Like, yeah, you read it last year, but you're not the same person you were last year when you read it. So something else might speak to you this year. It's also why every chapter of Talmud, when you finish a chapter, there's a line that Hadran Alach, whatever the name of the chapter is. It's we will return to you. It's like, we recognize we finished this segment, but we know we're going to have to come back because there's probably something we missed when we studied it last time. So we'll have to come back to get that another time. And you can do it over and over again, and still be learning something new each time. Yes, TK.
Two things. One is a response to something I think that Lisa said or asked about, and that is that we need to remember that this relationship, it was about self and relationship and why you do things. That relationship can also exist when you step outside into your garden. To me, that it's also a relationship with the earth and with nature that feeds us and that feeds that holy part of us. And the second thing is, I wrote this because I wasn't sure I could remember the thought. Can you look at Torah then not as being holy because it is literal and static word of God, but it is holy because it represents an attempt to build a just society in relationship with our best and deeply truest selves?
So, to respond to your first point first, yes, and I think Rabbi Artson has talked about this before, that yes, you absolutely can find God and connection in your connection with the world. And that you should find some connection in nature you should be able to see God in nature and should be able to find some of that connection in there. And that's not the only way to do it. I've had people who have said, like, why do I need to come to Minyan? I can just go watch a sunset. It's like, yeah, you can watch a sunset and you can find God in the sunset, and that's great. And it's not the only way to do it. And it shouldn't be your only way to do it. Like, you can see God in the sunset. You can see God at the ocean. Nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean that God's only in nature and God only in the sunset, and that there are other paths, and we should be striving to explore multiple of those paths in our own lives. To your second point, yes, at least to the first part, yes, that Torah is not a static, concrete document that I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrased it. Is not a static document, but the only twist I'd make about it helping us come to our best selves and lead our best lives. Again, you said it better, but summarizing, is that it's the interpretation of that document and the conversations around it in order to be able to live our best, fullest lives. Torah is, I think it is an attempt to tell a story and teach lessons about how we're supposed to live our lives, but it's in the conversation and the discussion that we learn how to live our lives better through Torah.
Which is why, excuse me, which is why this discussion, arguing, struggling with God is all about the process of trying to make it relevant. Yes?
Yeah. I think, you do it with love, you do it with a desire to deeper connect, then yes. You do it to argue and you do it for the sake of argument, maybe not. Or you do it to disprove, it becomes a little less. But when you do it with the intention of, I'm seeking a deeper connection and I'm wrestling with how to do that, then yes.
That's the way I meant it.
Yes.
Yes.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up for today? Because it sounds like people are having to go anyway. So, kol hakavod, everyone. Good to learn with you. And God willing, I look forward to learning together next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
See you
Kol
next
tov.
week.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.